Okay. So hopefully the cups will be here soon. I'm getting kind of thirsty. But welcome to MadJS. I'm Eric Sorenson, the organizer. This is Hani, the cameraman. Thanks for coming. You can follow us on Twitter at MadJavascript because MadJS was taken. It's actually a teenage girl that owns that, so don't send her messages about programming. Or maybe do. She gets kind of upset, and it's kind of entertaining. What?
Maybe we give it out.
MadJS?
Maybe she will give it out.
Oh. We'll try. We'll campaign. Thanks to Hani. Not all of them, but most of the past presentations are available on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and search for MadJS, you can see past presentations. So thanks, Hani, for doing that. MadJS t-shirts are still on sale. Actually, they're not on sale anymore, but based on the reports that I got from Screen.com, a lot of people saw the tweet and bought a lot of shirts. So right now we have this kind of shirt in all different colors, and there's a CSS3 shirt and an HTML5 shirt, Angular shirt, and my favorite is the IE Troll shirt, because this is what I feel IE is like all the time when I need to test with IE. Just kind of trolling my code. Midwest.js is coming up on Wednesday. So the workshops start on Wednesday, and the rest of it is on Thursday and Friday. So I think there are still tickets if you'd like to get one. I think we have 10 people now coming from Madison. So it's in Minnesota. Minneapolis. Yeah, if anybody needs a ride, I'll be going tomorrow night. There's an open seat in the car.
Wait, is it tomorrow?
I'm going up there so that I can be there for the workshop that starts at 9 a.m. on Wednesday.
My layover is in Minneapolis.
Yeah? Any other questions about Midwest.js? Any other announcements? Job openings?
I have
Or
offers.
what's that?
I'm looking for some people.
Yeah?
So I work for the University of Wisconsin-Madison,
Uh-huh.
and I'm on the network services tool team. So basically, we run the tools that do two things. On the public-facing side, which is where this crowd is most likely to fall in, we have user front-end kind of stuff for web forms that get filled out and posted to a back-end, and the back-end we also need a person for. Basically takes that and programs network switches and gear to do things. I can get into more detail if people are interested. And I can also, I thought that I sent a post to the list 2-3 months ago, but our recruitment failed, so we're reposting it. It depends on experience. There's about 5 of us, and we're all generalists. What we really want is like a really senior programmer with lots of experience. But if you've got a particular niche you're good at, we'll just work around it and let you do your niche, and we'll pick up the slack in the other sections. I don't know if the job description is clear enough. I think we'll talk in more detail if people care.
Are there...
the OpenStack person?
What's that?
OpenStack?
No. Basically, we're doing networking here. So it's the configuration of networking equipment. So on the back end, we've got a lot of Perl CGI, we've got a lot of LAMP stack stuff. On the front end, we got Ajax web forms and stuff.
Gotcha.
And then I write expect and the Perl and Python equivalent of expect scripts that go out and talk to networking gear and reconfigure them. That's exactly what that's for. Wow.
So ANTS is what we're 3750s and 25.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Nexus switches are coming, and so basically the ANTS developer got a really cool job working for a startup.
Okay.
I'm usually doing back-endy kinds of things, and I'm like I'm largely over my head and treading water with respect to doing the ANSI stuff. I'm happy to take either section of it. I mean, but yeah, that's where that's going.
Thanks.
ANT stands for Authorized Agent Network Tool Suite. It's how we let the 100 or so people on campus that have permission configure the 120,000 ports or so that they have permission to change.
Thank you.
Is it possible to put a link
on the Meetup website?
Absolutely. I will.
MadJS Meetup.
Yeah, I'll post that tonight when I get home. Or we have Wi-Fi. I'll post it.
Yep, there is Wi-Fi.
I just didn't want to get cold without asking. I thought that might be bad.
Any other announcements? Okay. Well, like I said, my name's Eric Sorenson. A bit about me. I've been doing front-end web development for around 4 years exclusively. All JavaScript, pretty much. Before that, I was in the Java world. So I've been working with jQuery a lot, and then I moved to Backbone, and I most recently been working on an Angular project, really big one. We've been doing MadJS for almost 3 years now, so it's pretty cool. I work right now at Primex Wireless, which is a company located down in Lake Geneva. I work remotely, so don't really go down there much. I actually live north of Chicago, but it's kind of complicated. Yeah, so I'm building with one other guy a very large Angular app. And what we're doing with this is basically creating an Internet of Things platform. So we're taking all of these custom-made sensors that look at things like temperature and air pressure and humidity, location, anything you can think of, and just put them all over the place to measure things that all different kinds of people want to measure. To give you an example, one of the things that we're doing right now is working with pharmaceutical companies and places like, I probably shouldn't say brands, but pharmacies. So they have these refrigerators in every single pharmacy that have this really sensitive, temperature-sensitive medication in it. And if they have a refrigerator break, they can lose entire batches of really expensive medications. So if something goes wrong with the fridge, they want to know as soon as possible. So they use these sensors to make sure that everything is working exactly as it should. And they can learn some really interesting things about not just the equipment itself, but people putting their extra burrito in the fridge that has medications in it on accident, not knowing that it has a bunch of other stuff in it. And yeah.
How do they currently communicate any issues with the refrigerator? Or does it? The refrigerator, does it communicate any problems right now currently?
It's just temperature, really. So
they look at something visually, some human has to go and look at it?
No, it's automated too. So if the temperature goes out of the range that's expected.
No, I mean before you innovated.
Oh yeah, they had guys going around from refrigerator to refrigerator. That's kind of why they want to automate it, is because it's all kinds of stuff with that. You know, making sure that ceilings aren't leaking when it rains. It costs so much to get somebody to walk around a hospital and find out where all the leaks are. If they can automate that, they can save a lot of money. So we're here today to talk about how to organize JavaScript code. The things I'm going to talk about are basically, the stories that I've run into. There are so many different ways to do this. It's crazy. So I can't really talk about them all, but I can tell you what I've done and what's worked for me. It feels kind of strange doing this with JavaScript because JavaScript was never meant to do anything like this, like the things that we're using it for. We're building these giant applications that are huge, and in the beginning, JavaScript was only meant for doing small things like reacting to a button click or a hover over or something like that. And we've just taken it so far that it feels wrong. Still, to me now. But we can't really change the language too much because everything has to be backward compatible on the web. People have tried and failed so far. Who knows, maybe somebody will succeed. So I'm going to talk about a few different approaches, and they all have strengths and weaknesses. So you're going to choose your destiny based on the kind of application that you want to build. You guys recognize this, right? Okay. So I'm going to talk about 4 different options that I've run into. Scenario number 1 would be the quick and easy application, where you just want to build something fast. It doesn't need to be special. Scenario number 2 would be a medium-sized app, where it's not necessarily throwaway. And scenario 2 is actually the one that's recommended by Google right now. Scenario 3 would be a large app with require.js, and 4 would be a large app with browser.fi. Did I just get a show of hands? Is anybody here using require.js with Angular? Or not with Angular? Anybody using browser.fi? Oh, cool. Nice. So when we're going to organize our app, we need to think about the hierarchy of needs here. And, this is Maslow's hierarchy. Functionality is obviously the number one concern, because if the app doesn't do what the users need it to do, then there's really no point to shipping it. But above that is we need to make sure that the user has a good experience, and that means that the app can actually all load into their browser, and they can figure out what to do, and it's fast. And the third concern that we have here is we have happy programmers, which means that a couple months after you ship it and you have to go back in and change some things, you're not going to be cursing at yourself or whoever it was that wrote the app because it's so hard to understand. I think we've all been in that situation, and it sucks, and we want to do everything we can to make sure that we don't make that happen again. It's so easy to slide into. So I think putting together a nicely organized app can really save you from that problem. So here's us replacing vacuum tubes. The things we want to do is keep it simple as possible. We want to make the app easy to work with. We want it to be scalable. If we have a group of developers that are working on it, we don't want to run into a bunch of merge conflicts. We want it to be maintainable. Easy to deploy is a big one, I think, and definitely be testable. That's a pretty tall order, but I think it's reachable, especially with Angular, because it's easier to do that with Angular than it was with jQuery or Backbone. So a couple of these two things together, and suddenly making a really huge app with JavaScript is not so awful. It's great. It's a good time to be a JavaScript programmer. But then, there's the rest of the world. There are the people that are not sitting in the programming room and don't have a wired connection to the application server. So we need to think about the users and how they're going to be using our app. Speed and reliability are two really big things. It's got to be fast, and it's got to be able to load up every time somebody needs to use it. There are a few twists in here. One that I've hit a lot is there are a lot of intranet apps out there. A large company has an internal web application that they need built, and in that case, things like bandwidth are not really as much of a concern. There's still a concern, but you can get away with a heck of a lot. And based on what I've heard, this is mostly what Google uses Angular for, is internal applications that deal with stuff that they do inside of Google. I don't know if that affected the way that they wrote Angular much or not. But then we have the internet, which is obviously this, and then bandwidth becomes a real problem, because the bigger that your app gets, the longer it takes to get from one place to another. And when we have to deal with things like mobile devices, people don't have unlimited plans. Well, I think some of us probably do from the old days. But the average person has, 200 megs to 2 gigs, somewhere around there. And if your app's too big, you chew through that pretty fast. And it's not really being a very good advocate for the web. And we can do better than that. We want to keep our apps as small as possible. And another thing that we need to worry about is the amount of time that it takes to make a request and then return the content. So if you're firing off a bunch of requests at once, that kind of stuff can really take a long time to do on a mobile device. So what we want to do is reduce the number of requests as much as possible and reduce the size of the application itself. We have to think about latency too. I mean, sometimes, have you ever been out in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin and you get on the Edge network? and the things that you are used to using when you were at home on your Wi-Fi suddenly don't work at all. I mean, that's a large chunk of people in the U.S., not to mention the rest of the world. And then hybrid apps is another thing that I suppose you got to think about. I don't have any experience with hybrid apps. Does anybody know where usually those files are kept? Are they kept on the mobile device?
Yes,
Yeah? So in that case, it probably wouldn't be...
it's not a problem having big, badass JavaScript files. No sweat.
It sort of depends on the hybrid app. Some use a mixture.
Okay, well,
You have to talk to the network
yeah.
eventually, but you can really stuff most of the application, as I did in my little demo a few months ago. So.
Does Apple allow us to pull script from the internet and use it?
There's a project called PhoneGap in Cordova.
Yeah.
That's your answer. It's too big for 5 minutes. It's doable.
Okay.
Just check out Cordova.org.
Yeah, and Ionic wraps that, but yeah, okay.
No. The answer is yes.
Yeah, okay, that's good, I guess. But against what you're saying, too.
Regardless, it's good to know what your hybrid app's doing. You know, if it's actually going out and grabbing something off the internet, you want to make sure that it's doing that in the best way possible. So modules. This is one of the crappiest parts of JavaScript as it exists today. JavaScript as a language standard doesn't have a concept of modules, and that has really held it back. Luckily, ECMAScript 6, which nobody supports yet but should soon, will support native modules. I cannot wait for this to happen. But the crummy part, I mean, as we all know, is that if not every browser supports it, you can't really use it yet. So we're going to have to find ways around missing modules. And that winds up being AMD, asynchronous module definitions, and CommonJS. Or you could just go old school and throw everything in one giant pile. But there are going to be consequences to that. So if things get complex, I don't recommend doing that. So, Angular. Angular has a concept of modules, but it's not a module in the sense of loading scripts. So when you create a module in Angular, it really has more to do with dependency injection than anything else. You still have to, if you have your modules, your Angular modules in different files, you still need a different way to make sure that all of those files get into the browser and get in there in the order that they need in order to meet all of their dependencies. And then there are third-party libraries, and that's where things get really interesting because it's just this giant mix of all different kinds of standards and people's ideas of best practices. They don't really follow any kind of module system. But for an Angular app, we need Angular and jQuery, well, probably jQuery. You've got things like ngRouter, UI router, they're probably using possibly a UI kit like jQuery UI or Kendo. To get all of these things into, all of these scripts into the DOM at once, and they depend on each other sometimes in interesting ways. It can get a little daunting. Another thing to mention is you can use a CDN to grab all of these things, but in the past, CDNs have gone down, and they have caused problems for production applications. So it's probably not a great idea if you're running a production app to depend on a CDN.
It's also really annoying to develop business.
Because they start to throttle you?
You have to reload and stuff every time.
Yeah, that's another good point. But to manage our third-party libraries, we can use Bower. Anybody here use Bower? Cool. I've really come to depend on this a lot, just because it makes it so easy to see all of the different versions of the libraries that you're using, and it makes it easy to track how to, centralize exactly where all your updates are coming from, because it's a huge pain in the butt to go out to the page for each of the libraries you're using and check to see if there was an update, and then download that file and drag it into your project, where it will definitely become out of date and may not even have a version number attached to it. And you get this library soup. You ever looked at a project and you see a script in there in the library folder and you don't know what it is or where it came from? You'll never have that happen with Power. So, recommended. And then we have these two guys, Gulp and Grunt, to help us manage all of the tasks that just we shouldn't be doing over and over. Automation. So we can use these to do things like we can update all of our dependencies through Bower. You can plug those two together. You can use these to minify, to build things based on your module systems. Add gzip compression. Reduce your request count. Stuff like that. It's a whole bunch of stuff that you can do with both of these. So, want to look at some code? Let's see. This is going to get interesting. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, it's pretty good on the top screen.
So I made this simple app. It's not going to work.
I thought it was going to be JavaScript.
I have a JavaScript version too. You want to look at the JavaScript and stuff?
It's the CoffeeScript.
Yes, it's CoffeeScript.
I figured that's what the coffee beans in the background.
Yeah. So I made this stupid little Angular app that basically has two different views. It has a navigation template and another template below that can change. Actually, they can both change, but it's kind of beside the point. And I created some stupid little, like some fake files that basically have the two users in them. So I've changed. So in here, where is my cursor? I cannot read that. I'm just going to mirror here. One sec. So here's my quick and dirty Angular project. So I'll go into the public directory so that we can look at the raw JavaScript and raw HTML, stuff like that. So I have this fake data directory, and in here I have some JSON, basically something that would be returned from a RESTful service. So this is a collection of users with an ID, a first name, and a last name. We have two things in there. And then to fake out the rest of the RESTful service, inside of a users directory, I have user 1 and user 2. So what's happening right here is this view down here is loading up the users collection. And if I hit edit on one of those, it loads up user number 1.json and shows that to us. So I can show you some of the code here. This is a really, really simple app. There are only two files being used. So I'll show you the index.html. So first of all, at the bottom here, we're making this really simple, and we're just including all of our scripts one by one. This is definitely not very efficient because these each block. So it gets this file, waits until it gets it, before it gets this file, waits to get that, before it gets this file. These are all happening synchronously. But, you know, sometimes that's good enough. Sometimes it doesn't really matter all that much. So I'm getting jQuery, Angular UI router, and Angular resource. And then down here is the application. The other thing that we have in here is the templates that are being used by the application. So there's a new tag called template where you can dump the template code that you're using in your Angular app.
Is
And
that
then
from HTML5 or is that from Angular? The template tag?
it's from HTML5.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So you assign an ID to that, and you can yank out the content from that using jQuery. Besides these templates, basically all I have in here is this right here. So I have the title, which you can see is right here. And then I have the nav view, and I've assigned that the UI nav view attribute. And then I have the main view here, right below that. So it's basically just 3 tags in the raw index.html, and then Angular will fill in the view content based on those templates. Any questions on that? Yeah?
I'm just curious about the like ng model and stuff. You put a data attribute thing in front of it, the data thing.
Yeah.
I've never seen that.
Yeah,
For Angular.
that's because I'm a stickler when it comes to valid HTML. If you don't put the data there or an X, it fails validators.
Oh, okay. So Angular will search for. It'll ignore that. Or did you hack Angular?
No, I didn't hack it.
Okay.
It will also look for the data dash or the X dash.
It's like you can do that for any attribute.
Yep.
Custom ones. Like we declare directly with the
Right. That's one thing that Angular has gotten a little bit of backlash for, is that they kind of say screw it to the HTML standards. But you can still write totally valid HTML with Angular if you want to. It's just most people don't care anymore, but I'm a little OCD, so I still do it.
I saw that in a tutorial, and I wanted to do that in my project, and the other guys that working with me, I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm glad to see you're doing it, because I would do it.
It's all fun until you actually screw something up because your HTML isn't valid and you can't track it down. And usually it's a browser that you're not working with when everything's fine in Chrome, and then you go to another browser like Firefox to test it, and it suddenly doesn't look the same. I've found that 9 times out of 10 it's because my HTML wasn't valid. Probably hasn't saved my butt enough to justify doing it all the time, but
HTML validator do you use?
what's that?
Do you use an HTML validator?
Yeah. Yep, I wrote a plugin for Sublime Text. So if you want to pick that up, it's an easy way to do it. From there, we can look at the app. Or do you guys want me to switch to JavaScript? Yeah.
Let's see what it looks like. I don't know.
It's not so bad. Okay, so all that's going on here is we're defining our variables up at top, because hoisting is going to do that anyway. Here we're defining the module for our application. Here's where we're yanking out the contents of the nav template that we were looking at earlier. So it goes and finds the template tag with an ID of nav, grabs all of the HTML out from inside of that, and dumps it into this variable. So we do that again with the user collections template and the user edit template. Then we go on to defining the service, which is basically a little function that grabs that allows us to work with a RESTful resource, and that's going to work with my fake users. So it looks for stuff in the fake data / users. Yeah, we use the ng resource. Is that a plugin? Module? I suppose it would be module. Sorry. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't used service yet, and I'm still kind of curious, like how stuff gets into the arguments, the incoming arguments. So like line 12 function resource. How did resource get in there, and what is it?
That's actually a pretty good question. So, yeah, this is one of the things that probably took me the longest to understand about Angular. What we're doing here is we're injecting the ng resource module.
So then how come router didn't become the first argument?
Right here, you mean?
Yeah, like in the function on 12, like on line 12, I would expect, since the array on line 4 was UI router and then ng resource, I would expect to see a router be the first argument into line 12's function callback instead of ng resource being the first argument.
It's not position defined.
It's not?
It's not very good.
It's based on,
Those are modules and the next is just
So if Eric put quote $resource quote before that $resource in the function definition, then that's what you're thinking about and what you see on Angular's website.
Well, no.
so you haven't tried to minify this, have you?
No, that is a very good point. I've not, no, I have minified it, but I have not mangled it.
Right.
Yeah, this would fail mangling.
Yeah. So if you're being a stickler about it, the way to do it is you actually have to define your arguments for the service. The second argument is actually an array, and it takes an arbitrary number of strings which define the modules you want to import, and then it takes a function as the last argument. And then the arguments of those functions are replaced with the modules that you defined in the same order that you defined the strings as the first X number of elements in the array. But this is the shortcut way, and it just takes the string that you define there, $resource, and it looks for the resource module, which it knows is entity resource.
But something is looking at the arguments that you passed into that you expect to come into the function on line 12.
Yes, which
Yeah.
is why mangling breaks it, because
Angular
you
does
change the name
something
of
with
the
our
argument.
That's weird.
It is weird.
I didn't even know that happens. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it'll throw you off, definitely. So yeah, this block right here, that's really all it takes to support a RESTful resource, which is pretty nice. It's even shorter in CoffeeScript. So I have a couple of controllers here. The navigation controller really just spits out date.now, so you can see that it's updating. And what happens in the user collection controller is, well, I guess this is getting a little bit more complicated. We're putting the users into the scope, which then can be accessed in the template. One, I suppose, kind of higher level thing I'm doing in here is using resolves. And the advantage there is if you attach a resolve object to your controller, you can create a list of dependencies a list of things that you'd like to go and fetch, like asynchronous operations, before you actually show the results of that controller to the user. So in this case, I don't want to show the template, the user's template, until I actually have the users. Because if I show them the template and then I fetch the users, there's this weird flashy blinking thing that happens as it loads up all the data into the template. So I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that they don't see my application in a half-rendered state. So this uses promises to basically go and fetch all of the users, and it just adds them into the controller when it's done.
Is that, sorry, is that an Angular thing or a UI router thing? The controller.resolve? Do you know?
So that works in both ngRouter and UI router.
Okay.
I started using it in ngRouter, but because ngRouter is so limited,
Yeah.
I kind of bailed on that pretty quickly. Yeah, I definitely recommend using this.
The place I used it is on the state provider.
Oh, yeah.
You're,
Well-
you're actually using it there. Got it.
Yeah. So like you say, down here where I'm adding the router, we use the resolve object on the user collection controller. So that's how you specify what you want to happen as your. I suppose it really is more of a convention than it is.
Yeah, it's in this organizational structure.
Yeah. So you keep everything bundled. Though right here, it's all kind of in one file, so it looks a little bit scattered.
Yeah, because it's kind of a pain. Because when you normally declare your resolves on the state provider, that's in a completely different file than your controller, and you're using the results got in the controller, and the name of it, users, has been defined on the state provider where the resolve is. So if you put it on your controller like that, it's not it's all the same.
Yeah, I didn't invent that. I stole that from somebody.
I haven't seen it before.
So yeah, like I said earlier, I had been using ngRouter a lot, but the real big problem with it that I ran into is you can't have two different views on a single screen, and that was a giant deal breaker for me that I ran into right off the bat. So from now on, I'm just using UI router, and it's really not that different. So if you want to switch, I recommend it. So yeah, here we're defining our different routes, and you can see the URLs here and here, and that defines what we stick into each view. So into each view, we're going to stick a controller and its template. So in the when we go to /users, in the nav view, we're going to stick the nav controller and the nav template, and in the main view, we're going to stick the user collections controller and the user collection template. And this comes in really handy if your app needs to change a lot depending on the URL. I mean, it really separates things out, so it's easy to track what's going on where.
Sorry, so by using this and doing routing and everything,
Yeah.
are you solving the single page app not being able to do SEO problem?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, sort of.
Sort of, okay.
I mean, Google would follow this as far as I know.
Is that because Google like executes JavaScript?
They do
whereas
now.
They don't? Okay.
I think most of the browsers do that.
Okay.
Well, one thing it does get us is, say we're here, and we click on Rodney, and then we hit the back button. We really do go back.
Yeah, I don't care about SEO either. Just curious.
And then, well, the other big thing is you can share links. So if I copy this link and send it to somebody else, it'll actually take them directly to this piece of the app, even though it's all a single page.
Yeah, I added routing to this open source project called Strider, or like continuous integration. But I did, and it's an Angular app, but I did routing like completely custom with just history.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's bad, but I
I wouldn't say it's bad.
Change it.
Probably not
Sustainable.
the Angular way. Somebody would probably be upset with it. Not me. And then the last step here is bootstrap the app to the document. And that is the app.
Is that another way of implementing just doing an NG app at the top of the body or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's the benefit of doing Bootstrap? I remember reading something online that didn't make sense to me, given how little knowledge I had of Angular at the time. And additionally, why do you put it all inside IIFE?
Oh, that was CoffeeScript doing that.
Oh, CoffeeScript just does it.
Yeah.
I've seen other people do that, or I've seen that in some examples, and does Angular supposed to handle more well by itself, isn't it?
Some people just do that everywhere
Sure.
because it creates a JavaScript scope that nothing can really get out of.
Right, but you're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But sorry, anyway, what's the benefits to manually bootstrapping instead of just putting ng app at the top?
The only one I know of is that is the only thing that works everywhere. Some of the other ways of organizing the application make it so that you actually can't use the attribute inside of the index.html. There's no way to do that. I can't remember what the reason was,
I
but
think it's a load order. I ran into it one point.
A what?
Load order. I thought
That-
it was.
that could be it.
Do you know if you can do that on two different elements on the same page?
Should be able to.
Okay.
I know you can have multiple Angular apps running in the same page, completely isolated.
Never said you should.
Should?
Never said you should.
Yeah.
What is the difference between having two separate views per URL and just having two divs with different controllers attached to them?
Two divs with different controllers.
It's
And
the
you want to
URL.
different functionality.
Managing the state of the application. So you can act with UI router, you can link to specific states. So on mouse click, you can change one of the swap it out. But where's that state though?
What?
Just the state of, the change of the application is where the state changes. That's what it's called. It's not necessarily in the URL at that time, it's just.
Theoretically, it's either in the URL or it's in one of the services. So you're kind of supposed to keep stuff while you're stated with the services. Those are sort of like the objects.
So in my case, I don't actually want to have the same controller in this view right here all the time. So I can swap out controllers in that same view, depending on what the URL is. And in some cases, like in an app I'm working on, I don't want to show the navigation if the user hasn't logged in yet. So I just don't include anything for that view, and it just doesn't show up.
Can you hit edit on one of those settings?
Yep, so that's a different controller and a different template because we went to a different URL.
No canceling out of this?
Canceling?
Yeah.
You have a back button.
I'm curious what's going to happen when you actually edit one of those names.
It's going to throw a 400, or 404, sorry.
Yeah.
I tried it because I was curious too. It's like 11 o'clock. Any questions on the little app?
How are you serving it?
That's a good question. I'm serving it with Gulp. So I have an Express server running in Gulp.
Do you need to have a Gulp file for that, or does it just work?
Yep.
Okay.
It's a CoffeeScript file. Is that okay?
That's okay.
Here it is. So I have all of this stuff here is my preprocessors and Express and I have live reload working on this too. So every time you change something, it recompiles all the preprocessors and then refreshes the browser for you. I have this Gulp file on my blog if you want to steal it.
Do you use the scripts section of the package JSON sometimes now instead of like Gulp and grunt and stuff?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
So did you write your first Gulp file for this project in JavaScript or in CoffeeScript? And if you wrote it in CoffeeScript, how did you put it in JavaScript?
I'll show you.
Because currently your Gulp file is doing all the translation.
This is how I did it. It's an ugly hack, but I haven't found anything simpler.
Are you referring to CoffeeScript or that little script?
So this is my Gulp file JS, and all it's really doing is requiring CoffeeScript and then running it on the Gulp file.coffee, which it imports. So it's basically a Gulp file. Does Gulp support CoffeeScript out of the box yet? You know?
I'm not aware.
Pull request that.
I'm sure somebody has. Yeah.
So is there a particular reason you're not using template files and you've embedded it all in your index?
Just to show that there's a way to do that. So if you want to keep everything in a small package with one for your markup and another for your JavaScript. Yeah, but I don't recommend doing that. I'll show examples of how to not do that as well.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah?
Does Angular use the Q promise library by default? Can you choose your own promise library like Blueberry?
I would think you could because of the dependency injection. I would think you could put whatever you want in there.
It comes with one which is Q compatible, sort of, for the most part. Like the $Q.
And it's a lot better than jQuery's.
Yeah. But it's a very small version of Q. What it does is the same as Q.
Does support JavaScript natively now?
It does?
Yeah, I think if you're on the latest, they'll probably just delete that JS file. Just create the first line require external module JavaScript/register, so it automatically pull it in.
Awesome. I'll do that as soon as I go home. Any other questions about the little one? Okay. So to look at the medium, I'm just going to go straight to Angular's Angular Seed project on GitHub and just look around a little bit. It's very similar to the app that I created, and I started making one with the exact same templates and controllers and everything, but this one's really close. So, and everybody has access to it too. So what they're doing here is, oh great, is the wireless bad here?
No, it's awesome.
It's the CDN that's causing all the trouble.
Probably they were using browser.
You're saying it's my browser?
No, if only they were using browser.
Oh. This is disturbing.
Yeah, really fast internet.
There we go.
Yeah.
So what they've done here is they've ripped up their JavaScript into 5 different JavaScript files. So they have the app, they have the controllers all in one file, they have all the directives in one file, all of the filters in one file, and all of the services in one file.
Is there any other like top level type of thing in Angular, you know, besides those?
Besides them, I think modules are about as high as you can go.
There's one more. There's factory.
Yeah. What,
But I think factories go in services.
Yeah, type of service.
But it's different.
And if you can explain the difference between the two, I would.
One runs and creates something, and one is created for you, and it's a singleton. The service is a singleton. And the function creates something every time you call.
the factory.
The factory, I keep calling it because it acts like a function, I call it a function.
Is it a factory
The
impl?
factory creates something. What's that?
Is it a factory impl?
I'm not
Like-
sure.
Is that a Java joke?
Yes, that was a Java joke.
Factory girl.
So what they're doing here is each of those 4 other files, the filters, the services, the directives, and the controllers, they're making a module for each of those, so you can swap them in and out. You can see they're putting it all together into my app here, and then they've jammed the router into the bottom of the app file. And here they are using template URL to point at an external markup file. And one kind of interesting thing about this is that doesn't AJAX request to go grab that file when you go visit that. So there's a potential problem here, and that is that if you're walking around and you get out of, with your cell phone and you get out of the signal range, you're not going to get that file. And yeah, they include their controllers, and here's the URL. They're using ngRouter for this, so you can see it's not really all that much different. They're also, I don't think they're doing, yeah, they're not doing any resolves here either, but pretty similar. And there is only one view.
How do you know they're not doing one in like the controller? Isn't that where you would do it? Or no? You do it in the route provider?
I specify them in the controller, but you do have to tell the router that it should wait for the resolves to happen. You do have
By the way, sorry, this is off topic. I was just wondering if you tried React.js.
I have not actually made a project with it yet. I'm scared. Have you?
No, no.
Maybe we'll do that next month or 2 months. So here it's very, very similar to the stuff that they're doing. They just keep all of the controllers in one file. But you can imagine if your app starts growing. I mean, I have what, 80 controllers in the app that I'm working on right now. If you had 80 of these and they also had a page worth of code in each of them, I mean, it starts to get huge. And then you start dealing with things like multiple people updating the file. If all of your controllers are being updated in one file and people are trying to do pull requests and merges, that just gets unmanageable pretty quickly. But I'm sure it's fine if you're doing something simple. And I get the impression that in Google's case, an Angular app is sometimes just a part of a page with the way that they do it. Like they're not actually building a giant application that only exists within Angular. They're just using it to help out other applications. I could be wrong on that, but
This is also the training project, and if you want to know what a controller looks like, you
What?
go to a controller, right? This is a training project. So if you want to know what a controller looks like and how they work, you want to see a couple of examples. So you're going to put all the controllers together and all the services together so you can see those.
is that what this is?
It's the exact same format as the tutorial they have on the AngularJS website.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This is like that. This is the same format with all of the actual tutorial stuff stripped out.
I guess that makes sense.
I mean, I've seen a couple of other C projects that are structured similarly. I mean, but I think the idea is definitely like once you have more than a couple of people, you're breaking them apart.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the real problem with that is you already have all of these script tags at the bottom. You start breaking those up more, and you could have 20 or 40 different script tags down here. And when each one of those are synchronous, that gets kind of nasty. And they have to be in the right order as well.
Yeah, the reader doesn't know like how to like really bring these in, you know, to a big app. He has to go find out about these other things like browser.
So doesn't a minifier solve that problem?
Yeah, it can. As long as you have everything in the right order all the time. Yeah, and you can also use, like right here, they have an asynchronous script loader. So it'll go out and grab all of these at the same time. And when they're all done, it'll add them to the DOM. But yeah, you could just minify it all yourself with gulp or grunt. Yeah, and then, like I said, their templates are in separate files. Any questions on this one?
What are your suggestions for file division, I guess?
Well, I have two suggestions. They're coming next. So first I'll talk about require. So this is what I'm using right now in production. And require is kind of awesome. It's based on AMD, which comes from Dojo, which kind of even I think it even predates jQuery as far as popularity goes, but it is brutal to understand and configure, and there are all kinds of really awful error messages that you get, and it feels like it's testing your strength until you get it right, and then once everything starts working, it feels pretty good. But it's full of all of these really strange settings. I'll try to. This is kind of complicated, so I'll try to start at the beginning. So Angular and require, they basically start with this main file. You guys want to see JavaScript. So what we're going to do in here is we're going to tell it about all of the files that we're going to be working with. And the first thing we're going to do is define all of the libraries that we're using. So we're going to tell it exactly what it's called, and we're going to tell it where the library is located. And in this case, I'm using Bower to pull in all of my different libraries.
What's resolutions?
Oh, that tells it which version to grab. So for some reason, when I download, is it UI router or resource? I can't remember. It acts like it doesn't know which version of require to use. So that's why we add that there. Yeah, I don't understand it. So this grabs all of our dependencies, and then we load them up here. And the real problem is that as libraries go, they don't follow the standards for AMD. So we have to use this shim object here to tell it that Angular depends on jQuery, and then it exports this Angular object. Luckily, jQuery does use AMD right out of the box. A bunch of other stuff does too, like Kendo UI will use it right out of the box, so you can just point require at Kendo, a certain part of Kendo, and then it'll filter out of the dependency tree and just grab the pieces of it that you need, which keeps the size of the app a lot smaller. And then, just like usual, we have the Bootstrap here, which launches the app, which is right here. Don't think there's really not much crazy there. We're just requiring all of our different dependencies, and then grabbing our service, and then we're plugging the service right here. We're plugging the service into the app, grabbing the router, plugging the router into the app. The router's now in a different file, and defining the module. So all the same stuff, just a little bit spread out. So you can see in here is our service, basically the same thing. The only difference is that we wrap it in this define function. And that basically says that what is returned out of this is what comes out of this module. So this is an asynchronous, it's an AMD module basically. And then we can use this in different parts of our app. So we've done this with the controllers. We've done it with the service. Another thing that I've done here is stripped out all of the templates. So there's the nav template, there's the collections template. You can see all the usual Angular variables in there. And a form. We've got the ng model defined for the form elements. And in the index here, we just require a single script. And that is the require library. And then we use this data main attribute to point it to the main.js file. which kind of launches the whole thing. And what this does in development mode is it uses AJAX requests to follow the dependency tree and grab all the different things that you need to run your app, including your templates, your controllers, your services, all of that. It kind of sucks in production though, because if you're trying to share something with somebody, you can be using AJAX requests for hundreds of files this way. But that is kind of nice for debugging. If something goes wrong, you know exactly where to look. However, when you're ready to go to production, you can run this grunt task. One thing to note is that require.js is not compatible with gulp because you can't use the optimizer with streams. That's a huge bummer. It basically pushed me away from grunt.
Grunt
Pushed me away from gulp.
Not require.js.
I want to give it up. I'm
Is it kind of
getting
like
there.
like because people who use require.js like they can't get off and go to other stuff.
That's
Like,
because
I noticed.
it has all of the problems solved. Somebody has figured out how to do everything. I'm getting there. I'm almost there. When I was working on this, I did a lot with Browserify, and I figured out a lot more than I figured out in the past. There's only one thing that I don't know how to do yet.
My other question was the templates that you have. Now they're outside of the index file. So how are you bringing them in?
That is a really good question. I will show you. So in the router here, there is a require.js plugin called text. So to grab the template, I use the text plugin and just grab the string that is inside of that HTML file, assign it to a variable, and instead of using the template URL key, I use template and just stick the string right in there. So the whole thing gets wrapped up together when you optimize, and it doesn't have to do that AJAX request out for the template anymore.
Okay, so let's say you have a template that you're gonna put on the screen repeatedly.
Yeah.
Is it gonna fetch it once and reuse the template, or is it gonna keep fetching it?
It's going to fetch it once.
Okay. Do you know?
Text exclamation point is the only one that fetches it.
Oh, okay.
Actually-
do you know if the do you know if ng include behaves that way too, or if it fetches 1,000 times, you have 1,000 versions? Caches.
Yeah, it'll cache it. But what's kind of cool about using require.js in this way is that when you optimize this, it doesn't have to fetch it because it already has it. It's all in that single JavaScript file. So you never have to make an AJAX request again except for data. And after you've taken all your libraries, yeah?
Is it a compile action before you've launched the app? Is that where the text gets injected?
It's the optimize process that you do on a deploy. So using...
It's a post or pre-compile kind of thing?
Yeah.
And the other way to do this is the caching, so that actually.
Yep. Yes.
But when you do that, the other way, unless you're doing the same require thing, doing an AJAX request, the way that I've been doing it is to actually, just forgot the word, but in the gulp process, like selecting the template, and then write out a JavaScript file that goes into the template cache, but it doesn't reload by itself without rerunning the gulp. Which is not a big deal, but in this case, this is kind of neat because you don't actually have to rerun the gulp file.
Yeah, it's two different angles. So yeah, the entire what you're getting when you optimize this with require is all of your libraries, all of your JavaScript that you wrote, and all of your templates go into a single JavaScript file. Then they get minified, and if you define your variables correctly, they can get mangled and then gzipped. And I've taken files that are like 4 megs of application, and you squish them down to about 200K, which is about the size of a decent picture. And that's like the entire app.
So you're developing all these files, but you deploy it in a few files.
One. One single file.
Can we see that? Do you have an example of not the gzip part, but the mangled file? I'm just curious.
Do I? I think I do.
But if it's mangled, the Angular won't like it. So how do you tell it to not mangle, or is it not mangled?
App.js is not mangled.
Well, this one. So there's an unminified one here, and then a minified one here.
And that's require that's doing all that?
That's gulp and require working. No, sorry, grunt and require working together.
So grunt puts it together, but require pulls in all the requirements.
Grunt has all of the configuration, but there's an RJS optimizer that you can use, and Grunt will call that and then spit out basically everything stuck together, and then you can send that to Uglify to minify it, and all of that is in a Grunt script.
Can we see the grunt task? Or the grunt
Yeah.
thing? It's probably like looking at the dependency graph that require uses or something and builds it off that. Like
So R knows how to do that because that's part of require.js.
okay.
Yeah.
That's the
That's
require.js
Uglify.
R.
Is there a
Yeah.
Minify task?
Portions require stuff.
Oh,
It seems
Uglify
like
does
the browser
is
finds
minified.
Minify?
Yeah, but I have
It's in
Mangle
JavaScript, so
set
Mangle
to
is
false.
Its name is
Oh,
R.
so you have to have that.
JS is the name of the
Angular.
application that does it.
Yeah, so
There's
here's
R script language.
here's the RJS, all of the settings. Getting this right probably took me 6 hours. I mean, it was awful. But once I got it, I just kept running with it.
Yeah, I only gave require like 4 hours, and then I was like, all right.
Yeah, that
let's
is
find
not
something else.
sufficient. I can't say that it's worth it to spend more time on it, but
So if he would have gone another 2 hours, he'd be like where he is.
Yeah, exactly.
well, no, that was just barely getting it working.
It's kind of like that 10-year age cheddar, you know. It's like after 9 years, it's just not ready.
So,
What if you use Yeoman scaffold for your application?
I have not actually tried that yet.
Dude, Yeoman gives you like a 300-line like grunt file, and it's like, okay, go have fun. Like, dude, you just filled my project full of crap already.
I was going to ask about that, but I was waiting. I'm glad you brought it up. About a year ago, Yeoman was the way to do it. So, do you know anybody who's using it, or has it fallen out of favor, or what's the deal with Yeoman?
I don't think it's fallen out of favor.
It was a MadJS.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I hear
There are a bunch of recipes out there for it, and I don't think they're necessarily bad.
Are you
It's,
supposed to delete? Like when you get a Yeoman thing, just do a delete stuff, or
I don't know.
Keep it
There's
there?
just so many different ways to solve the same problems, and there's so many different problems at the same time. So there are so many different ways that you can put this stuff together.
So Yeoman you can only use if you have a greenfield, single-page JavaScript application.
I don't
right?
think that's true either. They have migration tasks too.
Use it to add modules and stuff here. Require to your LinkedIn graph.
Is anybody using Yeoman?
I used it to start the project,
Yep.
and then I ripped it apart because it's a very opinionated workflow that you should follow, and I already had a workflow before that, so I started with it. It was great for examples, but then I didn't like the process.
Yeah, I've spent a ridiculous amount of time on this stuff. Just- another thing is that you can use a project called Almond to also reduce more code. So instead of using the entire version of require.js when you optimize, you can just use this little sliver of Almond.
is that the thing that like notices you're not using this code, so it drops it? Is that
No, not quite that complicated. It just doesn't have a lot of the boilerplate. You know, the code to do the Ajax requests.
one time. Kind of.
What?
It's what you need to have it's what you need to have a require.js app in the browser. Is that what it is?
Yeah, just the basics of AMD, and that's it. Yeah, so that's my grunt file.
Yeah, that's great.
But in this case, I actually use gulp and grunt together. So
Gulp's handling task is to run
No, where is that? Yeah. Yeah, I have a build. See, I have a build command in Grunt that runs gulp optimize, and then takes that and then runs RJS on that, and then minifies that and spits that out.
So why did you need to do that?
Because you can't do the optimizer for require.js with gulp. It doesn't work with streams.
So then do you initiate this from your package JSON?
No, I don't. I don't do that yet. I should do that.
It runs out of cron job, actually.
Anybody want to have any other questions about require?
So I kind of missed this, I guess, but how do your controllers how does require find your controllers? Is that in main.js or is that somewhere
It
else?
is in app.js. So at least I thought. No, it's not. It's in the router. Sorry. So I require them in the router,
Okay, yeah. So,
and then I set them
yeah.
in there.
And you have your main.js, you have the actual paths to where those
In the main.js, I only have the paths to the libraries.
So out of curiosity, why do you like to put your controllers and your services together instead of putting things that are like doing like actions together? So for instance, if you have the women's apparel section, I don't know, that's not a good example. Wasn't supposed to be how it sounded. I was just throwing some descriptors together. All right, so we had an example, an app where every tab had discrete actions on it.
Uh-huh.
And so I put the controller for the tab pane and its template and its services and such like that. Everything it needed to do things in one directory, one location, so that it's siloed. And I see a lot of us putting this stuff like EJB beans, Java beans, and the separation of actions that starts making it so that if I'm looking at this one controller, I now have to go somewhere completely differently to get the other action I'm doing. So how do you juggle that? I mean, this is a demo, so you might not be doing it that way now.
I think a lot of it just depends on your app. The apps that I've worked on have never really followed modules like that. I mean, what you're talking about, it almost sounds like you could create modules.
I did.
Separate, yeah.
Every page, everything was a module.
In the app that I'm working on right now, a lot of it, I mean, the services are used all over the place and in multiple controllers, and they're all kind of dealing with the same subject matter.
Okay.
So it's really tough to figure out a way to...
So in your case, your controllers are more generalized in some way that they can handle different data.
Yeah, they all, I mean, some of them use 8 different services inside a controller. Because we're taking data from a bunch of different places and then figuring out how to display that with context from a bunch of different other services. Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, and it varies from application to application.
One thing that can happen, you don't always have a one-to-one pairing of controller and template, and essentially controller. You can sometimes have controllers, in other words, different business logic that have maybe a similar or identical view.
Yeah.
So, it's not always wrong.
Or even like editing and creating a new user could use the same template. It's another.
That's it. Yeah, that's what I'm
So the last one that I have is Browserify, and this is the one that I have the least amount of experience with, and I spent a lot of time getting to know it better. And I don't know. I think I might almost be sold on it just because it is so much simpler to work with.
How many hours did that one take you to learn?
I don't want to say. So, what's really cool about Browserify is that, first of all, it works with Gulp. Second, it uses CommonJS, which means that you have this giant library to work with from NPM. Though there is kind of a caveat there, and that is that those are all meant for the back end, right? They're not all of the front end libraries that you're used to. Some of them are there, and they've been modified to use CommonJS modules, but it's not all flowers and happiness, because they're not all up to date, and not all of them are there in the first place. And the only way that I've found that you can get a library into Browserify is to use NPM. There's probably a way to shim them. Has anybody tried that? Yeah, that is one thing that I didn't really get to.
I've been just using the script tags and then putting my own code in Browserify. Because if I put third-party code in Browserify, it gets too unruly.
Yeah. I have heard of other people doing that, or even taking all of the third-party code and then concatenating that, and then using the Browserify code below that, so you require all of your dependencies and then your code. And that's not bad. But what's really cool about this is you don't have to use Bower anymore. You can just use your package.json to include stuff like Angular and all the other stuff. It's all in there. And then when you want to use it, all you have to do is require jQuery or require Angular, just like you're in Node. This felt strange to me. I was putting the wrong thing in here, thinking that I had to track down the actual Angular file, but Browserify knows about your package.json, and it knows where everything is. So it handles all of that tracking for you. So it looks really clean here. There really aren't a whole lot of, there's not much difference between creating modules for CommonJS than AMD, I found. The only big thing is that instead of starting out with a require function or a define function, you use module.exports to tell it what you're returning from this module. That's really it. And then when you require this file, you get the nav controller out of it. So I'm.
Oh, sorry. I don't see exports on here in this file.
That's because this is my. Do you have to put it in your app?
I'm just curious. I'm just asking. He never requires it somewhere.
Well, even if you do, it just doesn't have. It returns void.
It's an empty object. Yeah.
It messes with global or something.
It does stuff, and then it doesn't have any return value. Right, because you would like require Angular, not actually use that. If you wanted to do something with Angular.
Yeah, he's doing it different from what I've done. So.
So yeah, there's really not much different in here.
So where's the Browserify part again? The package.json.
Package.json.
Browserify's a default task.
Yeah. So here's where I bring in Browserify, and you also need the vinyl source stream. But then in Gulp,
What does vinyl source stream do?
I think it converts one kind of stream to another so that Gulp can use it. Is that right?
You're post-processing the bundle.js that comes out of Browserify?
Yes.
If I remember correctly, Browserify not actually helping that at all. Convert the stream.
Where am I doing it? Yeah, it's right here.
Oh, you're really bending over backwards to use Gulp here, aren't you?
what's Gulp doing for you again that you were always going to it? It's your go-to.
The reason that I like it, you mean?
Yeah. What is it doing for you?
The great thing about Gulp is that it's really, really fast, for one. Far faster than Grunt. And it also uses streams, which means that you can basically pipe different commands together. So you can take all of your CoffeeScript files, convert them to JavaScript, and then concatenate them and spit them out to a single file without ever touching the disk. It does it all in memory.
So if we don't use CoffeeScript,
Well, the minification.
it does benefit.
There's a lot more.
I'm trying to figure out where it's coming from.
I mean, there's.
You get to avoid intermediate files.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like Unix pipes also exist, and he's using pipes, so
Yeah, but they're slow.
People don't like to use bash, that's what it is.
yeah.
They prefer to use their own program.
It's a little more than that. So Gulp does essentially incremental compilation, and it keeps every source that it's used before, every stream that's used before in memory, so that when you make a change, it only has to reload the change file from disk, and all the other files that it's going to concatenate together, it pulls out of RAM. So it's much, much faster than running a similar process in Grunt, which is a big win if you're doing development like with it while the incremental compiler is running.
So Gulp is like an ant.
Yeah, except it's really fast.
But
Grunt is
it's doing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean Grunt does too.
Does the Unix pipe write to disk or something? Isn't that just as fast? So then that would be competitive to this.
Except it sounds like he's
Yeah, but if
keeping
you're
memory
doing,
after
if you're writing in CoffeeScript, or if you're doing something that's not as fancy as require.js, and you're trying to concatenate a bunch of JavaScript files every time you make a change, then you're not going to have a task just sitting there waiting for changes in Bash. You're going to have to rerun the compilation step, and when you do that, it'll pull everything off the disk.
And you're gonna have to respawn all of those processes after they finish, because when you got all those Unix pipes, when they're done doing their business, they go away. I'm not familiar with Grunt. If I understood what these guys just said, it basically remembered all of that stuff for next time.
Oh yeah.
So it doesn't have that overhead.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
I'm sorry.
So Gulp is running the whole time.
Yeah, so I run, so for my development process, and I assume Eric's doing the same thing, I run the gulp command, and then it just sits there and waits for me to change a file.
Yeah.
As soon as I change a file, it'll reconcatenate everything, reminify everything, browserify everything,
As needed.
and then I reload the browser, and I can't reload the browser fast enough to beat gulp to the punch.
You don't even have to reload the browser.
Okay.
Yeah, you can actually set it up to do it for you.
So what
I
it
have.
sounds like to me is Gulp solves the problem that I hate about CoffeeScript, and that is you have to wait for all these things to compile.
Yeah,
You don't have to.
for the most part.
I mean, I did use CoffeeScript with Grunt for a very long time, and it wasn't terrible, but it was close. It was very close to being terrible.
When the app got really big,
Yeah, it took a
you
while.
change a file and then you could see it running through.
But Gulp will, sub-second.
It doesn't even recompile the files that you haven't changed. It's still got the compiled version of those files. I don't know what the nomenclature is in its stream.
You can actually do that with Grunt too, but it's still not fast.
Why is there a desire to minify every time you make a change? Why wouldn't you just minify once you've got a stable package?
You wouldn't need to.
It's just something you get for free by doing it manually, since you have to compile CoffeeScript anyway.
I never minify when I'm working in development. I only do it when I go to production. But I mean, if your app's small enough, you're not going to be able to tell anyway. It's just going to be a blip on your CPU. But yeah, the kind of crummy thing about Browserify is that you actually have to concatenate everything every single time. You can't just download them piecemeal like you can with require.js. You actually have to put all of your libraries and your application files into one before you do anything with it.
So, in the real world, I thought it was the case that for a lot of these popular libraries, if you're coming off of CDNs, your browser cache is going to know that they all exist, and they're just there anyway inside the local browser cache, and so you're not paying that performance penalty to download. If you got an application that's concatenating, unifying, rearranging, and scrambling, those requirements that They don't get those for free anymore. I don't have practical experience in this area, but I mean, where's the trade-off and is it worth it?
It's a good point. I mean, that's why I only put my own code in the browser 5 bundle.
Okay.
I can give you a reason why you would want to do that. It's, you're going to have a lot more outstanding web requests round trips that are different than sequential, rather than just one. It's a big difference.
So to elaborate what you said, the idea is take a hit the first time, and then the application will run smoothly after that. Because you have one file with one signature. So you will take a hit. You have 200K that you need to download the first time, and after that, it's just one page JavaScript.
I like this approach where you say just put your own personal stuff in there, and the stuff that's going to be common, get from the CDN.
You see, I don't trust the CDN anymore because I've had bad experiences with Google CDNs and O'Reilly CDNs and pretty much stuff that I use on a daily basis, and I'm looking, what the heck, what's going on? And then sure enough, it's always being bugged down on a CDN.
What kind of bad experiences if you had it simply?
Meaning, so I'm waiting 30 seconds for whatever website I'm using. For example,
No, I've had a ton of it with ads and that kind of CDN.
there wasn't any ad on the site.
Just applications.
Yeah, O'Reilly,
Okay.
I want to access my content from O'Reilly, and I'm waiting 30 seconds on their CDN. So I took a screenshot and tweeted it to Tim O'Reilly's.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For reminders. I'm sure you restarted.
So working with require.js, yes, there is, in your setup you can specify, if there are libraries you do want to pull from CDN instead of bundling it, that main.js can, when you're looking at the paths, you can specify this library, is not my personal code, it's in the CDN, and then the optimizer knows to work around that, so it doesn't include that. So fairly seamless with require.js.
Likewise, for my application, because we control all the resources, the CDN is me. But when I rewrite things and change things, everyone's browser cache already has the local copy of those libraries that I'm making a copy of. Thank you.
So the one thing that I didn't do here is figure out a way to get my templates inside of the browser-fied bundle. You see, I'm using the template URL here and just giving it a string so it can do an AJAX request to grab that template. I can't stand this for some. I don't think it's rational that I can't stand it necessarily, but I'd love to be able to get that in my bundle.
What's so bad about that? Because it's making a request.
Yeah.
There's a Gulp plugin to suck in your templates and turn them into strings in JavaScript and then put them in your template cache.
I'm gonna have to look at that.
It's really nasty, but once you put it in place, you don't think about it anymore.
It's like that closet that's full of crap.
I'm actually using that. It's like 5 lines of code.
Yeah, I use it too.
Really? Can you send me a link to that? Or put it on the Meetup?
What makes it nasty?
I mean, there's just these huge strings in JavaScript. In this JavaScript file that you never look at. But if you do look at it,
Like, I think I've got some in here.
I guess there's a trade-off for that, loading it like that and putting it in your JavaScript. 'Cause then you have to wait for the page to load, or the scripts to load before you see any HTML.
yeah, I mean that's the trade-off of doing a single file approach.
Well, all the UI.
Yeah, here are my templates in the optimized require.js.
Yeah, there it is. That's not even a very long template. If I scroll bar, I can't even see the scroll bar.
Because they can't do a break type.
Yeah, it's all one line.
Well, if I can figure that out, maybe I'll make the switch. And I'll be able to dump grunt.
So in React.js, you're synthesizing the DOM elements in the JavaScript code, which I guess is different
Yeah.
from both of these things that we're talking about.
So
I think it's really ugly too.
that's
The-
painful.
The idea is cool. What I'd kind of like to see is a virtualized DOM that is based on JSON, and you make changes to the JSON object.
Because React has XML.
Right. Wait, why did they have to add XML to it? We were almost done with XML.
I think they're with.
We're never done with XML. Never.
It smells like the fat.
These
I'm just waiting for it to be done.
Well, you have, like I said, you gotta talk to the big iron man.
So yeah. Any other questions or suggestions? Yeah.
So, comparing browserify and required JS, is really your only pain point on the required JS is that you can't use Gulp as easily? Is that really the pain point for you? Or?
When things go wrong, it's really hard to fix. It's just not a pleasure to work with. I mean, I love a lot of the tools I use, but required.js is not on that list. It's done a really good job at doing things I needed it to do for a long time, so I can't really fault it that much, but I'm looking around.
I mean, in your experience, like when things break in required.js, is it an issue with the error messages and finding where the problem is?
Yeah, the error messages don't make any
'Cause
sense.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of what I ran into, and I never really got past that, where I tried to convert a relatively simple application to required.js, and like I couldn't figure out what was broken. I mean, of course, it didn't work on the first try, and I spent several hours on it, didn't get there. So threw that away, went to browserify and it worked. So
I cannot blame you for doing that. Not at all.
But yeah, with my experience with required JS, if you have pieces that are already AMD set up, like jQuery,
Yeah.
it does just work.
Yeah.
A lot of the other ones, yeah, you have to shim it in, and if it doesn't recognize it. The only other real pain point I found with required JS for the development setup, I'm not using a live reload, and the one issue of acting like a CDN of even like a browser hard refresh won't catch, an AJAX request for a script. Sometimes we'll still grab the cached one that I had to, for my development environment, had to set the Apache headers for 1 second expiration for JavaScript files to make sure that they actually would be fetched every time.
Are you using
Because-
Chrome?
Yeah, for Chrome.
Yeah.
Needed to blow away the browser cache every time. There was an AJAX fetched script change.
Just disable the cache.
Disable the browser cache entirely. So it was getting feedback from other colleagues needed to teach them how to nail their browser cache too.
Here's the temperature.
Yeah.
So you were talking about building an application using required.js that had like 80 controllers.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that? So here, I mean, you've got a few controllers, and like the required statements are starting to get a little bit long. How is that in your kind of real application?
Oh, the router is just huge,
It's very big. Yeah.
but it's not really been a problem because it's so obvious what's going on.
Yeah.
I probably should break it up into a few different pieces though. The real pain point that I've run into is dealing with multiple people working on controllers. And once there's more than one controller in a file and people are trying to work on different pieces, the merge conflicts are just awful, and it's not worth the trouble. So we just break everything up into smallest chunk possible, and there's no problem with breaking things up when you're using something like require or browserify, because it all just gets stuck back together anyway. Well, that's all I had. If anybody has any ideas for things that I could do better here, I mean, I'm far from an expert. Yeah?
I'm just curious about your experience with testing in require versus browserify, like unit tests.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking back to That's something that I haven't really done a whole lot with,
Unit testing?
with unit testing, you can just pull in the files that you want to test when it comes to unit testing.
Yeah.
Do them bit by bit.
What do you use like Mocha and stuff? Because my experience has been on Browserify. Since they're already Node modules, I can use Mocha and like the Node.js development tools to test my code, which I really like. I don't know how I would do it with required JS.
I don't have a recipe, so I'm kind of hesitant to say anything. I could put one together.
Do you guys do like browser testing, like Selenium type stuff?
Yeah, we've done a bit of that with what do they call it? Protractor.
Okay. That's the is that the one that Angular endorses?
Yeah, that's based on Selenium.
I
It still
hate
uses.
those tools.
Well, yeah, it still uses Java, so you have to set up. I think it's 3 different processes, and then they fire up your browsers and run
Has
through
anyone
them.
tried Dalek.js for that? It sucks too.
I've been using Karma to do testing on Angular with Browserify. Or actually, this is an Angular app. I have no idea, but I use Karma on my Angular app as well. But the one with Browserify.
I have a lot of problems with require with Angular with Karma. There's a shim that's available from the Karma team to make require work. I worked with it for probably 4 or 5 hours and then just gave up and said, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, that's something I haven't spent a whole lot of time on, so can't really add much.
It's technical debt, man.
Yeah.
Shaving yaks.
We're all heavily in debt.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming.
So, Eric, who can give presentations at MadJS?
This question.
Who can give presentations at MadJS? Anybody, right?
Anybody.
Because I hear lots of really cool ideas. I think some people should get up and present.
That would be me.
Thank you. Thank you for the pizza. Yeah.
Yes.
Brought the pizza.
What?
Who's
I
the
did.
sponsor?
You did. Oh.
I'm the sponsor.
Best sponsor ever.
Yeah. You need a sponsor?
Yes.
Okay. I'll send you an email.
Okay.